I am Lamont at Large. Today, I am at the Mount Olivet Cemetery here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'm here to ask a question. Whether it's wrong or not, when is the right time to kill? If you were to ask Richard Chester Jahnke's friends if they could describe him, they would say, no frills, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, kind of stern, very straight edge kind of guy. If you ask Richard Jahnke's two children to describe their father, they might use different words. They might use wife beater. They might use child abuser. And the daughter, Deborah, would say rapist. Richard Jahnke ruled his house with a iron fist. He was a military man. He met his wife, Maria, in Puerto Rico while he was in the Army. They met, got together, had two children, a son and a daughter, Deborah and Richard Jr. And at the time, Richard worked for the IRS. He was an investigator. He was a very stern disciplinarian, very, very hard on his children. The beatings, the spankings, the whoopings, from the time they were 2 years old, he would inflict what he felt was the just punishment for whatever crime the children committed. Going as far as making sure they brushed their teeth correctly, and when they didn't, he would brush them for them to the point where blood was drawn. So throughout the years, the kids always envisioned a life where their father wasn't around. The daughter, Deborah, would often dream of getting really, really good grades in school, going to college, and that would be her ticket out of there. And Richard Jr., well, the ticket out of his miserable home life would be to possibly join the military. That appeared to be his way out. So the family used to live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and Richard Sr. felt that living in a big city that there would be bad influences on their kids with drug use and stuff. So he packed up the family and they moved up here to Cheyenne, Wyoming. The neighbors would describe the Jahnkes as kind of reclusive, stayed to themselves, weren't very friendly. The two kids were normal. Some would also say they're kind of nerdy, but a normal type of nerdy. But the fights between Richard and his son would get really heated, and as Richard got older and bigger, the older Jahnke, 5'8", 200-pound bully, well, his son was getting a little bit too big to bully. A lot of disgusting acts went down in that household. The nights when Deborah would be sleeping in her room and the father would come in and just lay down on his daughter. That's how it started. He would just lay down on top of her. And then as she developed into a woman, he would often cup her breasts, stick his hands down her pants. And there is a claim of one night of sexual abuse at the hands of the dad. A lot of physical, mental, sexual torture as described by the children. And it finally reached a crescendo. On November 16th, 1982, that was the 20th year anniversary of when Richard and his wife first had their first date. And to celebrate, they were planning on going to Maria's favorite Mexican restaurant here in Cheyenne. But of course, before they left, Richard and his son got into a very heated altercation. Got into a fist fight where Junior, this time you got the best of him. And Richard, having health problems, having high blood pressure, slithered away out of breath, went to go get his blood pressure medication. When things calmed down, he told his son to clean up the mess that he made from the fight. And he told him before he left, "You're a piece of shit, and I'm going to find out a way to get rid of you." And they left, and that was it. Those were going to be the last words, the last derogatory words that the father would ever say to Richie Jr. So he set his plan into motion. He goes upstairs to his sister's room and tells Deborah, "This is it. Tonight's the night. I'm going to kill Dad." And Deborah looked at him kind of with a nervous excitement in her eyes. And she says, "Really?" And he says, "Yeah, that's it. No more. We're done. We are done." Richard Sr. was an avid gun collector. He had well over 30 firearms in the house. He would often take his son shooting, trained him, taught him how to use all types of guns. So Richard goes to the gun room, if you want to call it that, the den, and grabs a .44 Magnum, a .38 revolver, a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, and an M1 carbine rifle. He proceeds to show his sister how to use the M1 carbine. During the trial, Richard stated that the reason why he gave her the rifle was because it didn't have a lot of kick, as a shotgun would. He gives her the rifle, gives her a quick, rudimentary lesson on how to use it. So the plan goes as follows. Richard took about 5 more guns, loaded them, and scattered them all throughout the house at different locations. His thinking was this: when they get back to the restaurant, he was going to meet him outside. If he somehow got away from him or the gun jammed, he would have several different areas of the house to grab loaded weapons. He learned that from watching Conan the Barbarian, how the character in the movie had a bunch of swords and daggers in different parts of a area that he knew he was going to be attacked. He tells his sister, "Stay on the couch, keep the rifle. If I don't get him, he's going to have to get through you." So Richard, the father, and Maria, they go to the restaurant. They come back at around 6:30 p.m. They pull up to the driveway, and they notice that all the lights in the house are on. Every single room, the lights are on. And this already angered Richard because he's already told his kids plenty of time, if you are not in a room, turn off the light. Junior said in a transcript during the trial, the reason why he wanted to turn all the lights on in the house was to elicit some form of light blindness, so that when he came home, it was dark and everything was lit up, he wouldn't be able to see. The father then proceeds to get out of the car with Maria right behind him. And he's met by 2 bullets from a 12-gauge shotgun to his stomach and his chest. The wife immediately screams. The force of the blast spins the father around. And to make sure that the job was finished, Richard Jr. let off 4 more shots striking his father in the back and the buttocks. The father fell down and died right there, drowned in his own blood, the bullets ripping through his aorta. The first shot was definitely the shot that killed him, but the other 5 shots, they were just desserts, if you want to call it that. Maria's screaming. Richard runs into the living room, and Deborah says, "Did you do it?" He says, "Yes, let's get out of here." So they flee. Junior takes a car, drives with his sister, drops her off at a park, and he goes to meet up with a friend. Fast forward the next day, Richard is caught by the police, and Deborah turns herself in. The police interview them and ask them what happened. And he says, years of physical, mental, sexual torture, abuse from the hands of my father upon me and my sister. We did what we had to do. This case was all over the news. It was all over the media. Nationwide attention was focused during the trial. Originally, Richard was charged with first-degree murder, and his sister was charged with aiding and abetting first-degree murder. A jury could not convict them on those charges, so they ended up convicting them of voluntary manslaughter for Richard Jr. and aiding and abetting voluntary manslaughter for Deborah. Deborah was sentenced to 5 to 8 years in prison, and Richard Jr. was sentenced to 5 to 15 years. But there was a public outcry. There was a public outcry. They had no choice. They had to kill him. Thousands of letters were written to the governor of Wyoming. And under public scrutiny, the governor commuted the sentence. Deborah was free. She was released. She did a year of probation. And Richard Jr., he was remanded to the Wyoming home for boys until he was 21 years old. They both eventually got out. They left Wyoming. They changed their names. And that was it. A bully met his match in his son. I'm not saying that killing is right or it's wrong in whatever given circumstance. But Richard Jahnke Jr. and Deborah Jahnke, they felt that they had to do what they had to do. They were the jury and they were the executioners. So we're gonna go walk to the grave of Richard Jahnke. And I thank you guys for listening to my long-winded story, but this was quite a story and I wanted to tell it. And when you look to the right, past this heart-shaped stone, is the grave of Richard Jahnke. January 13th, 1944 to November 16th, 1982. Payable on death. A bully no more. All right, guys, thank you for watching my video. I'm out of here. Peace out.